and that's George Gershwin. So let's begin with one of his tunes that he wrote toward the end of his life. It's called Love Is Here to Stay. Love Is Here to Stay. I once played at a retirement home, and the person who was running it said, why are all these songs so short? And I said, well, the real reason is because they were written in 32-bar format, and they were written to be filled on a folio of sheet music, front, back, so it's easily to fold. And think of the 45 record in the old days when I was a kid. So they were meant to be short. They often had a long preamble if they were in a Broadway show, but the songs themselves were 32 bars. And what these composers like George Gershwin and so many of his peers did with 32 bars was quite exceptional. So anyway, here's another favorite of George and me too. It's called Embraceable You. Gershwin always resonated with me. It's probably because my grandmother was a very accomplished pianist, and she taught music in school, and she also played piano for her church. And as my mother tells it, she loved nothing better than to go out and buy a new piece of sheet music. She would lived in the downriver area near Detroit. She would take the bus or drive all the way up to the city of Detroit and plunk down 25 cents for a new piece of sheet music. And I do remember the name Gershwin for somehow, because as a child, I was not a fluent reader. As a matter of fact, I couldn't read at all. So, so the name Gershwin, I couldn't figure out what it actually was. But in my memory, I see it in her sheet music. But anyway, here's a song. George had aspirations of playing creating larger pieces of music, and as a matter of fact, went to Paris to study, where he studied with Nadia Boulanger, whom others like Aaron Copland and many other composers studied. But he also fell in with Maurice Ravel. And Ravel, the composer of Gymnopédies and many other things, said, you know, George, he said, I can turn you into a mediocre Ravel, but you're already a great Gershwin. So stick with what you know. So here's his tune, Rhapsody in Blue, which I think is his first symphonic piece, and it has a blues feel to it, and that was by design. So here it is. again, from George's last year in his life. And what's extraordinary, I keep saying his last year of life, he died at the age of 38, and summer of July, I think, 1938. And he was obviously still a young man, and he was a very gregarious person. Everybody loved him. He was, women fell all over him, and men loved his company. He was just a wonderful, upbeat kind of person. And he was a great piano player, too, in addition to being a composer. But he started behaving a little erratically, and finally he was hospitalized, and sadly he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he succumbed. But what's interesting about it, it was 1938, the day he died, the radio networks turned over all their programming to tributes to George. I mean, we see this today with our cable channels when a celebrity dies, but imagine back then what an impact he had, where people would remember him with live tributes. So anyway, this is called Love Walked In. I had the opportunity to play George Gershwin's last piano. It was one in his mother's place, and it was given to the University of Michigan, which has a George and Ira, which is his brother and lyricist, George and Ira Gershwin Institute, and it was donated with the express prescription that it must be played by students and faculty. They didn't want it reserved just for concerts, but they wanted students to play it. So I had the opportunity to play it. It was totally restored. They took the keyboard off because it was in bad shape, but they saved that, and it's in a museum case. But an all new keyboard, a Steinway Model B, 1930. So one of the highlights of my career to be able to play that piano. Anyway, so let's move on with some more music from George. Here's one of his, he wrote a lot for musicals, and here's one, They Can't Take That Away From Me. I don't know if it's from a musical or not, but it's got a lot of whimsy to it. George and I went to do a musical in London, and there's a famous picture of them both getting off the boat in Southampton, which is the harbor area, or not the port nearest London. Anyway, it's called A Foggy Day. fancy call the whole thing off. So anyway, now let's take it a little bit of an upbeat here. Here's one of my favorites, "Oh Lady Be Good." It's said to be played slowly and gracefully, but we'll start out there and then we'll have a little fun. I'll kick it up tempo. Here's one from a musical, "Of Thee I Sing." George was a great improviser, and one of the purposes of the Institute at the University of Michigan Music School is to restore his scores. And the things he wrote for symphonic music would be pretty much written, but George would probably play it differently every time, and that's the true form of an improviser. He also was a New York City kid, so he would go up into Harlem and play. And there's stories of him playing up there, and some of the rent parties. A rent party was where they would have an impromptu concert and stuff, and a little bit of booze. This was during Prohibition, of course, to raise money to pay the rent. And George would be invited to sit down, but after a while, some of the others would push him aside. And anyway, but great. He was a great sport, and I'm sure he enjoyed it a lot. So here's one of his more famous songs, kind of a ballad, "The Man I Love."